Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to solve equations that involve fractions. Now, there are different routes you can take to solve some of these equations. Like, for instance, on this first equation, somebody might try to subtract 3/4 from both sides and then get a common denominator and combine the fractions. But what I like to do when I can, if it's convenient, is to just go ahead and eliminate all the denominators. And you can do that with an equation because, remember, anytime you have an equation, you can multiply each term in the equation by the same number. That's because you can, the multiplication property says if we multiply the right-hand side by, say, 24, that's legal as long as we multiply everything on the left-hand side by 24. Now, why did I say 24? Well, if you look at these denominators, I have 4 here, and 24 here. So I want a number, I want the lowest number that I can divide each of these values into. So the lowest number that I can divide by 4 and 24 would actually be 24. So in other words, the lowest common denominator here is 24. Now, since each of these denominators will go into 24, let me show you how that's helpful. If I take 24 now and I multiply each one of these terms by 24, so I multiply 24 by 3/4, I multiply 24 by the 5/4 m, of course that's a minus, and then 24 times 114 over 24. Okay, well here's what I can do. Now you can do it the long way, do 24 times 3, then divide that by 4, but there's a shorter way. I know that 4 will go into 24 in the numerator 6 times, and then 6 times 3 is 18. Okay? And then I do the same thing here. 4 will go into 24 6 times. Come on, 6. And then I have minus 6 times 5m. Well, minus 6 times 5m is minus 30m. And then here, when I multiply this by 24, then this is like 24 in the numerator, and it cancels into 24 in the denominator, which is, just gives me 1. And of course, 1 times 114 is just 114. Okay, now it looks like problems that we solved earlier. See, so now all I have to do is, to solve this, is I can subtract 18 from both sides. So I'm going to take 18 away from both sides, and then that way it'll get me the minus 30m all by itself on the left, all by its lonesome. And then if I subtracted 18 on the left, I got to subtract 18 on the right. So 114 minus 18, well, that's 96. So I get negative 30m equals 96. And now I'm kind of skipping some steps now, since you should be smarter now about solving these. So I'm just going to tell you what I did. If I divide both sides of this by negative 30, then when you divide the left side by negative 30, you just get m. And if you divide the right side by negative 30, you get 96 over negative 30. And then if you reduce that, that's actually a negative fraction, and you can divide divide 6 into 96 and divide 6 into 30 to reduce this fraction. 6 goes into 96 16 times, 6 goes into 35 times, so the answer is m equal negative 16/5, or I also wrote it as a decimal for you as well. So let's take a look at this one. Notice on this number 2 here, I have a denominator of 2, a denominator of 4, and a denominator of 16. So the lowest common denominator, in other words, the smallest number that all three of these will divide into, is 16. So I'm just going to multiply everything by 16. Now don't forget about this 3 here. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 16. I'm going to multiply 3n over 2 by 16. And then on the right hand side, I'm going to multiply the 7 over 4 times n by 16. And then I'm going to multiply the 19 over 16 by 16. Okay, now this is easy. 16 times 3 is 48. Here we can do the little trick. We know 2 in the denominator goes into 16 in the numerator 8 times. And then I have 8 times 3n, which is 24n. And then here I know 4 goes into 16 4 times. So I have 4 times 7n, and that's going to be 28n. And then here 16 over 16 is just 1. So I have minus 1 times 19, which is minus 19. Okay, now I have a variable term on the left and a variable term on the right, and I have a number on the left, number on the right. So what I'll do is what I did earlier. To get rid of this number 48, I'll subtract 48 from both sides. So take it away there and take it away there. And then that'll cancel the 48. And it'll leave me with 24n on the left. And then on the right, I didn't do anything with the 28n, so it'll still be there. And then a minus 19 minus 48 is actually minus 67. Okay, so now I want to get the 28 away from this side. So I will subtract 28n from both sides. So I'm going to subtract 28n from the right side so that it'll cancel with the positive 28n. And if I do that, then I also have to subtract it from the left side. So I have 24n minus 28n, which is minus 4n. So on the left I have minus 4n, and on the right I have negative 67. Now, to solve this for n, you divide both sides by negative 4. So you'll end up with negative 67 divided by negative 4, and negative divided by negative is 67 over 4. Now I didn't write that any other way, but you could write that, I believe that would be like 16 3/4 or 16.75 is another way to write that. On number 3 here, I did something a little bit different. Since this 2/3 is actually outside of this parentheses, what I wanted to do first was I wanted to distribute the 2/3 through these two terms. So 2/3 times m is just 2/3 m, straightforward. But 2/3 times 9/4, you can do that over here somewhere just to make sure. 2/3 times 9/4. Now you can do it the long way and say, okay, that's 18 over 12. So that, and then you can reduce that. If you divide the top and bottom by 6, you get 3 over 2. Okay, there's another way you can do, you can cancel the 3 into the 9 and the 2 into the 4, but if this works for you, just stay with that. So 2/3 times 9/4 is 3/2. So that gives me 3/2. And then I've got the minus 10/3. That wasn't in the parentheses, so I won't distribute through that. And then on the right I have negative 53 over 18. Now look at my denominators. My denominators contain 3, 2, and 18. So the lowest common denominator would be 18, because 2, 3, and 18 would all go into 18. So I'm going to multiply each of these fractions by 18. So I'm going to take 18 times 2/3 m, 18 times 3/2, 18 times 10/3, and 18 times negative 53/18. Okay, so if we do the little trick I showed you, 3 goes into 18 6 times. Messed that up, but anyway. 6 times 2, right? There's a 2 right there, right? So 6. Man, I can't get that right, can I? All right, just go with me here. There's a 6 right there. Tell you what, I can't do it. Come on. 6. Okay, so 6 times 2 gives me 12m, so I get a 12m. All right. Then here, if I go 2 into 18, let me just say I'll get 9, and then 9 times 3 is 27. And then here, if I divide 3 into 18, I actually get a minus 6 because of that minus. So I have minus 6 times 10, so that's minus 60. And then over here, if I multiply that by 18 here, the 18 cancel, which 18 over 18 is just 1, so I get 1 times negative 53, which is negative 53. And now on the left, I can go ahead and combine 27 and negative 60, because 27 minus 60 is negative 33. So I have 12m minus 33 equals negative 53. And now this is just now a two-step problem. I can add 33 to both sides and then divide both sides by 12. So let's add 33 to both sides. If I add 33 over here, it'll just cancel the minus 33. And if I add 33 over here, negative 53 plus 33 gives me negative 20. And then, again, I didn't show you the division here, but all you have to do is divide both sides by 12, and you get m equals negative 12 over, negative 20 divided by 12, which is the same as negative 20 over 12. And then you can reduce that. If you divide the top and bottom by 4, that's actually negative 5/3. So that's negative 5/3 or negative 1 2/3. Okay, I got one more here that I'm going to do. This one also requires me to do a distributive property before I do anything else. So let me go ahead and distribute this 2 through right here. So if I multiply 2 times n, I get 2n. And then when I multiply 2 times 3 halves, well, what's going to happen is the 2's are going to cancel, and I'll just get 3. Now, if you didn't like that, well, then just multiply it out long ways. 2 over 1 times 3 over 2 would be 6 over 2, which is 3. Okay, now I've got 6, 3, and 2 are my denominators. So my lowest common denominator here would be 6. So I'm going to multiply every term by 6. So I'm going to take the 7 over 6 times 6. And the 6 will just cancel because that's 1. 6 over 6 is 1, so that'll just leave me with 7. And then if I multiply this by 6, well, 3 goes into 6 twice. But since I have a minus, that's going to be minus 2 times 4, so that's going to be minus 8 times n, so minus 8n. And then if I multiply here by 6, I get 2 goes into 6 3 times. But now I have a negative 3n here. So I have 3 times negative 3n is negative 9n. And then, of course, 6 times 2n is 12n, and 6 times 3 is 18. So I have 12n plus 18. So let me clean this up a little bit on the right-hand side. Minus 9n plus 12n is 3n. So on the right-hand side, I just have 3n plus 18. On the left-hand side, I have 7 minus 8n. Now, this is another one of those where I have a number on both sides and a variable on both sides. So let's subtract the 7 from both sides. That way I'll get rid of that 7 that's on the left. And then over here I'll have 18 minus 7, which will give me 11. So I'll get minus 8n on the left and then 3n plus 11 on the right. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this 3n. So I'm going to subtract 3n from both sides. So if I subtract 3n from both sides, I get 3n minus 3n over here, which just cancels the 3n. That's what I wanted it to do. And I'm just left with the 11. And then since I've subtracted 3n from the right, I got to subtract 3n from the left. So that's minus 8n minus 3n, which is negative 11n. And that's going to give me negative 11n equals 11. And then all I have to do now to solve for n is divide both sides by negative 11. And if you take 11 and divide it by negative 11, you actually get negative 1. And so there's your final answer. Okay? So that that takes care of your solving linear equations that involve fractions. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about in the next video is how to take a formula and solve it for a particular variable. And it'll require some of the same techniques here that we were doing on these problems.